I ended up humiliating my sister-in-law after she went behind my back and did a DNA test on my daughter. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and I have a daughter who's 6 years old. The thing is, there's no biological connection between us. None at all. We aren't related by blood in any way. Her mom and I had been friends since we were kids. We were never romantically involved, just really close friends. She had her daughter at 23 with her husband, who was 25 at the time. When my daughter was just a newborn, about 3 months old, both her mom and dad were killed. I won't get into all the details out of respect, but it was a workplace shooting. They both worked in the same building, and they both lost their lives that day. Her mom and dad didn't come from great family situations, and neither had siblings, so there wasn't anyone to take in their daughter. But since I was close to them, I was able to adopt her. Even though I wasn't sure about having kids at the time, I couldn't let her end up in foster care or with strangers. I felt a responsibility to step in and give her the love and care her parents would have wanted. My parents and siblings are fully aware that Lily daughter, isn't biologically mine. I've never tried to hide the fact that she's adopted, even from Lily. She knows her biological parents are gone and that they were killed by what I've explained to her as a bad man. Of course, I'm saving the full details for when she's older and ready. Now, Lily looks nothing like me. She's a perfect mix of her biological mom and dad. Most people who see us just assume I'm her biological dad and that she got her looks from her mom. I don't bother correcting them. It just feels unnecessary. My brother has been with his fiancée for about 2 years now. A few weeks ago, we were all hanging out at my parents' house, and my sister-in-law, to-be, saw an old picture of me, Lily's mom, and her dad. She pointed to Lily's mom in the photo and asked who she was, so I explained that she was Lily's biological mom. She got quiet and just stared at the picture for a while, but I didn't think much of it at the time. To be clear, my SIL knew my friend had passed away, but I guess she didn't realize that Lily had a dad too, or that I wasn't biologically related to her. I think she assumed Lily was mine and my friend's biological daughter. What I didn't expect was for her to go and secretly get a DNA test done on Lily without telling me. She used my brother's DNA for the test, and when it came back showing they weren't related, she realized that meant I wasn't Lily's biological father either. She came up to me, waving the results in my face, and accused me of raising another woman's affair baby. All of this right in front of Lily. I just stared at her for a second, and then I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I told her, yeah, I know Lily's not my biological daughter. It's called adoption. Her face turned bright red and she stormed off. My brother was mad at me for embarrassing his fiancée, but I told him she embarrassed herself by sticking her nose into something that wasn't her business. I mean, seriously, what was she expecting to accomplish? Did she think I was going to break down and abandon my daughter? My brother said she thought she was doing the right thing, but I called him out and told him she crossed a line, plain and simple. It turns out my sister-in-law had her suspicions and my brother helped push her to get the DNA test done. He thought it would prove that I was actually Lily's biological father. He basically manipulated her into thinking the test would clear up any doubts, when in reality, he was just trying to prove that I'd been lying about the adoption. Well, obviously, the results showed I wasn't Lily's bio dad, and my brother was completely wrong. He felt too embarrassed to admit to his fiancée that he'd been lying to her from the start, which is why she came to me with the results. My SIL later apologized for confronting me in front of Lily. She explained that her mom had an affair, got pregnant by another man, and let her father believe the baby was his. When her dad found out, it shattered him, and she grew to really resent women who would do that to their spouses. She told me that her plan was to sit down and talk to me privately about it, without Lily around. But when she saw me with my daughter, she got so upset, thinking I was being tricked into raising someone else's kid, that she lost her cool and blurted it all out right then and there. She feels terrible about the whole thing now, and honestly, she's pretty mad at my brother for lying to her. I told her I'm not angry at her for getting the test done because she really thought she was helping. I've also forgiven her for the way she told me the results, since it's clear that the whole issue of affairs is a sensitive topic for her. It makes sense why she would react the way she did. From what I understand, she's thinking about breaking up with my brother now, and honestly, I can't blame her. When I called my brother to confront him, he came clean. He admitted that he'd lied about the situation. When I asked him why on earth he thought this in the first place, He said he couldn't wrap his head around why a guy like me, who wasn't keen on having kids at the time, would just adopt a baby unless there was a biological tie. He told his fiancée that I was Lily's real dad and had known it all along. Then he took it even further, claiming that I was with Lily's mom at the time she got pregnant. So now both me and my parents have decided to go low contact with my brother for a while. I know I'll forgive him eventually, but right now I just can't. The fact that he thought I was the kind of person who would have an affair with a married woman, get her pregnant, let her pretend the baby was her husband's, and only step in because she died, that's a lot to swallow. Update: my sister-in-law is now my ex-sister-in-law. For those wondering what ended up happening with my brother and SIL, well, she dumped him. They tried to work things out, but that only lasted a few days before she gave him the ring back. Then, my brother decided to get completely wasted and showed up at my house in the middle of the night, yelling on my front lawn. It was a huge problem because Lily had school the next day, and this woke her up. He was shouting all kinds of insults, not just at me, but at my daughter, too. We had no choice but to call the cops, and they took him to jail for the night on a drunken disturbance charge, or something along those lines. And yeah, I pressed charges, because some of the stuff he was saying was borderline threatening toward me and Lily. I'm not sure if it's enough for a restraining order, but if it is, I'm going to get a temporary one to be safe. Now on to the next story. I'm caught between a rock and a hard place, and I honestly have no clue what to do. The worst part is, I can't talk to anyone close to me about this because it's just too personal. I've been married to my wife Andrea, 48, for 8 years now, and her daughter Cassie, 17, has been a part of my life the whole time. I love them both like family. Cassie is really smart, one of those kids with a bright future, and me and Andrea wanted to make sure she wouldn't be buried in debt after college. So we started putting together a college fund for her. Over the years, it's grown to a little over $200,000. Cassie knows about the money, and she's counting on it since she's aiming for the Ivy League. But here's where it all went south. Last week, I found out nearly $170,000 was missing from that account. My heart nearly stopped. I went straight to Andrea and asked if she knew anything about it. She started crying and admitted she'd been using the money over the years to fuel her shopping addiction. I was furious, to say the least. But in the middle of that rage, I had a moment where I thought, what if this isn't just about spending? I've seen enough stories to know that maybe something worse was happening. So I straight up asked her if she was having an affair. She denied it right away and even offered to show me everything. Her social media, emails, work phone, the whole 9 yards. She also said she'd show me the receipts, and after going through it all, I didn't find anything suspicious. The math on the receipts lined up, so I let that idea go, but we were still left with the main issue. The money was gone. Andrea admitted she's got a shopping addiction, and she just couldn't resist using the money from Cassie's account. She didn't try to make any excuses, but she didn't have a fix for it either. As you can imagine, I was still livid. She'd completely destroyed Cassie's chance to get through college without being buried in loans, and honestly, that changes her whole future. I asked Andrea to stay with her sister for a bit while I tried to wrap my head around all this. Cassie was curious why her mom was leaving, but we just told her we needed a little space to sort things out. Yesterday, I asked Andrea to come back home so we could have a long talk about what we were going to do. As we were talking, she stopped me and asked for a favor that I honestly couldn't believe. She wanted me to take the blame for her. To explain, she and Cassie don't have the best relationship. For a lot of reasons, they've never really clicked. Cassie is very independent, and I think she's planning on leaving as soon as she can, maybe even before she finishes college. The thing is, me and Cassie get along really well, and she usually comes to me for advice when she's dealing with something. Andrea's terrified that this will be the final straw, and she'll lose Cassie forever. I told her that before we even talked about me taking the blame, she had to own up to her mistake. I told her she needed to go to therapy, we needed couples counseling, she had to join a support group for her shopping addiction, and that I'd be in charge of our finances from now on. She said those conditions were tough but reasonable. I also said she needed to come clean to Cassie, apologize, and hope for the best. That's where she drew the line. She refused and said she couldn't risk losing Cassie. According to her, I could survive the fallout from this, but she couldn't. I told her that if she wanted me to even think about taking the fall for her, she needed to agree to my terms first. Now I'm completely stuck. I don't want to lie to Cassie, but at the same time, I don't want her and Andrea to be estranged forever. The hardest part of all of this is that no matter what we do, Cassie's life is going to be messed up. And I have no idea how to get that money back except maybe dipping into my 401k. If anyone has any advice, I'd love to hear it. Divorce is always an option, but despite everything, I still love Andrea. And let's be real, dating again at 52? That sounds like a nightmare. Update, I've made my decision. I won't be staying with Andrea. She's been lying and manipulating both me and Cassie for way too long, and I've finally hit my limit. The fact that she stole not just from me, but from Cassie and her grandparents as well, makes this almost unforgivable. The person who's been hurt the most in all of this is Cassie. She's got such a bright future ahead of her, and I'll be damned if I let Andrea's selfish choices ruin that for her. I also want to take a moment to answer some of the questions that have come up, some of which I've touched on before, but I'll address them here again for clarity. Where the money came from. Over half of the money in that account came from Cassie's grandparents, Andrea's parents, her biological dad's parents, and my parents, who Cassie also considers her grandparents. They all contributed, which is why I knew exactly how much was supposed to be there. Why I didn't manage the account, Cassie's my stepdaughter, and while I consider her my daughter in every way that matters, Andrea handled all the financial aspects for her. I just trusted her with the money I gave her for the account, and she would show me statements, probably doctored in hindsight. I suspect she was pocketing the cash whenever I handed it over. Noticing the shopping, I did notice the things she was buying, but she always had an excuse. Either it was on sale or she'd gotten a bonus from work. Andrea makes a good living, and I thought she was being responsible, so I didn't push too hard. I did question why she needed so many pairs of Christian Louboutin shoes, but she shrugged it off. People might not understand, but it's surprisingly easy to burn through $170,000. Big purchases. A huge chunk of the money went to buy Mercedes, which I mistakenly thought was a lease. She claimed her friends were laughing at her old Lexus, which was 7 years old. Keeping up appearances for her wealthy friends has always been really important to her. Cassie and Andrea's relationship. Cassie and Andrea have never been close. Allegedly, Cassie reminds Andrea too much of her late father, and that's created a lot of tension. Cassie prefers talking to me, and while we maintain a healthy parent-child boundary, she considers me one of her best friends, her words, not mine. Why I almost took the fall. I now realize Andrea was manipulating me into taking the blame, and doing so would have led to a mountain of problems I didn't need. Plus, honesty is the best approach in situations like this. Fear of being alone. In my last post, I wasn't thinking straight. I was scared of being alone, of facing life as a single man at 52. But I've come to terms with that now, and I know I've got some personal issues I need to address. I do love Andrea, and we have a deep connection, but I'm still going through with the divorce. Oddly enough, a comment about chlamydia outbreaks in senior homes made me laugh and helped me realize that dating at my age isn't impossible after all. Also, thanks to everyone who gave me such kind compliments, it really boosted my spirits. After my last update, I had another long talk with Andrea. She kept going back and forth on whether or not she'd admit to Cassie what she did. At one point, she suggested we could both take out loans to replenish the money. I told her that wasn't the point. She had a problem, and she needed to make things right. I took a page from the advice I got here and told her that making amends was the only way forward. When I brought up divorce, she panicked and agreed to confess, but only if I didn't leave her. I guess she's terrified of losing everything. That afternoon, we sat Cassie down and told her the truth. At first, she thought we were joking, but when she realized we were serious, she completely lost it. I won't go into the details, but she and Andrea had a vicious shouting match. Cassie called her some pretty awful names, and while Andrea didn't curse back, she tried to defend herself and got more upset as the fight escalated. It got so bad that the neighbors called the cops. I had to awkwardly explain the situation to the officers, hoping they didn't think I was abusing anyone. Cassie told Andrea she never wanted to speak to her again and didn't want a dime of her money. Then she stormed off to her room. After that, I told Andrea she needed to stay with her sister indefinitely so Cassie and I could have some space. She didn't want to leave and fought me on it, but I stood firm. Eventually, she packed up and left. Later, I knocked on Cassie's door and she finally let me in after I told her Andrea had left. She cried in my arms saying her future was ruined. I reassured her that it wasn't, and that I'd cover her college expenses using my retirement funds if I had to. She doesn't fully understand what a 401k is yet, but she told me she didn't want me working at Walmart when I'm 90 just because of her. I told her she's worth it and that we do stupid things for the people we care about. She said she'd start looking for scholarships and maybe consider other schools where she could get a full ride since she has excellent grades and extracurriculars. I also admitted that Andrea wanted me to take the blame and that I had briefly considered it. Cassie got upset and said that would have been the dumbest thing I could have done. She said she wouldn't have believed I did it anyway, and it would have only made her more furious with her mother. I apologized for even thinking about it. We talked for a while longer and cuddled before calling it a night. And the next morning, I got a call from Andrea's parents asking if the story was true. Cassie had told them everything and they wanted confirmation. I showed them the bank statements and voice recordings as proof. They were furious, but begged me not to leave Andrea, asking me to help her through her addiction. I told them I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet and hung up. Later, my parents called, and when I confirmed the story, they were even angrier than Cassie. They're threatening to press charges. I told them to calm down, I'll handle it. Cassie's doing okay, all things considered. She's still a bit shocked by everything, but honestly, she's handling it better than I expected. This morning, I made her some pancakes, and that seemed to lift her spirits a little. I asked if she'd be interested in therapy, and she said she'd think about it. As for me, I've already decided to start therapy for myself. Andrea has been blowing up my phone, but I'm not answering. She's left voicemails offering anything and everything to fix things, money, sex, favors, you name it, but none of that is going to make a difference. I feel awful for Cassie, especially with Christmas around the corner. I'm thinking about getting her tickets to see Billie Eilish since that's pretty much her favorite person in the world. It won't make everything better, but it might help her feel a little bit of joy during all of this. That's about it for now. I'll update if anything major happens, but I think this chapter is coming to a close. Thanks to everyone for the support. It's been a huge help. While there are far fewer people living with depression, we see a huge need for it. Edit, I forgot to mention I've been keeping an eye on my credit, and thankfully nothing looks off there, but I'm going to lock it just in case. Next week, I'll be meeting with my accountant to get Andrea removed from everything important. Life insurance, bank accounts, my will, all of it. I'm adding Cassie in her place. I've also started changing all my passwords so Andrea can't access anything. I'm stringing her along for now, pretending the divorce isn't happening until I have everything secured. As far as I can tell, Cassie's credit is fine too, but I'm planning to do a deep dive and lock hers as well. Update. It's been a while since I last posted here. A lot has happened, and to be honest, I haven't had much time to sit down and write an update. But now that I have a quiet moment, I wanted to catch everyone up. First off, I want to thank you all for the advice and support you gave me during one of the most critical times in my life. Looking back at my old posts, I can't believe how unsure and lost I sounded. The thought of my marriage ending and the idea of being alone really shook me to the core, which made me come across that way. Therapy has helped me realize that being single isn't the worst thing in the world. In fact, I've turned that loneliness into time for myself, and I've been focusing on self-improvement. And in case you haven't guessed from that, yes, I'm single now. Andrea and I are legally separated and in the middle of divorce mediation. Unfortunately, Andrea is still in denial and doing everything she can to win me back, including dragging out the divorce so we can work on things. She claims she's seeing a therapist and is on the road to recovery from her shopping addiction. I don't know if I believe her, but I told her that if it's true, it's a good step. She's apologized to my parents, her parents, and her late husband's parents for what she did, and they've all forgiven her but are definitely keeping their distance. She's desperate to reconnect with Cassie, but Cassie is sticking to her word and hasn't spoken to her mother since that blow-up. I think she'll reach out when she's ready, but for now, she's holding firm. As for Andrea's wealthy friends, the ones she was always so eager to impress, they've been stopping by, offering their help. They might be a little nosy, but they were actually very kind to me and Cassie after everything went down. They brought everything from baked goods to spa day offers. I never turned down the baked goods. Homemade lemon bars and oatmeal raisin cookies are hard to resist. Cassie even took them up on a few spa trips. One friend in particular, Susan, has been around more than the others. While some of the other women felt like they were fishing for gossip, Susan just seemed genuinely interested in helping us heal. She's cooked meals, helped around the house, and spent a lot of time with me personally. We didn't ask for any of this, but she did it out of the kindness of her heart, and I really appreciate it. We've gotten pretty close, and despite her being 14 years younger than me, we get along surprisingly well. Normally, I struggle to connect with younger folks, but not with her. Now, onto the most important part. Cassie. As a Christmas surprise, I took her and one of her friends to Montreal last month to see Billie Eilish at a festival. She loved it, and we had an amazing time. Montreal is such a beautiful city. Despite everything, Cassie handled the loss of her college fund pretty well. She's a hard-working kid, and she threw herself into searching for scholarships. Unfortunately, she missed the deadline for most of them, but the school she had her heart set on came through with a very generous financial aid package. On top of that, she got some local grants that will cover her entire first year. And yes, she got into her dream school. She had several acceptance letters and full ride offers from other places, but she had her sights set on this one. I dropped her off last week and I couldn't be prouder. I know she's going to do great things. Now, I'm an empty nester, alone in this big house. The silence can be deafening sometimes, but Susan has been keeping me company, and I've picked up bike riding as a new hobby. All in all, things aren't perfect, but they're definitely better than before. And with that, I think it's time to put this story to rest. The divorce should be finalized in the next few months, and I'm ready to move forward. But the best part of all this, Cassie is chasing her dreams, and that's what makes me happiest. My wife denied her own daughter the opportunity to join the Ivy League because of her shopping addiction,